That was the first surprise. For weeks, I had imagined the shock of it, an icy slap that would jolt the breath from my lungs one last time. But as I sank into the black embrace of Serenity Lake, all I felt was a profound, numbing quiet. The pressure in my ears was a dull throb, a final heartbeat counting down to silence. The frantic lights of the city above bled into a blurry watercolor, then winked out. This is it, I thought, a strange sense of relief washing over me. No more report cards, no more weigh-ins, no more Chloe. My lungs screamed for air, a final, primal rebellion. I ignored them. My body was a lead weight, my will a stone. I had given my mother 14 years of my life to mold, to break, to rebuild in her twisted image. This last act, this final sinking, was the only thing that was truly mine. But then, something shifted. It wasn't a sound, not in the way the living world knows it. It was a vibration in the very core of my fading consciousness. A voice like dark honey and shattered glass, speaking directly into the space where my soul was beginning to unravel. Well, this is a waste of a perfectly good vessel. My dissolving thoughts snagged. Who? A presence bloomed in the darkness behind my eyes. Ancient, powerful, and utterly effused. It felt like a supernova igniting in a vacuum. You don't want it anymore, do you? This skin, these bones, this tedious little life. I had no voice, but my despair was an answer. I thought so. Such a shame. So much untapped potential. So much rage simmering just beneath the surface. You just never learned how to use it. A tendril of its energy, cool and sharp as a shard of obsidian, brushed against me. It wasn't threatening. It was curious. Tell you what, little bird, you're already halfway out the door. Let me borrow this body for a while. In return, I'll show you what true ecstasy feels like, the kind you only get from watching your world burn. The offer was insane, a drowning girl's hallucination. But what did I have to lose? I was already gone. A silent, formless nod was my only reply. The world exploded back into existence. I gasped, but the air that filled my lungs wasn't for me. I felt a jarring lurch, a sensation of being violently scooped out of myself. One moment I was the driver, the next I was a ghost in the passenger seat of my own body. I watched, weightless and invisible, as my hands, no, her hands, paddled with an effortless, predatory grace. My legs kicked with a strength I'd never possessed. She broke the surface without a sputter. The moon cast a silver sheen on the water dripping from her hair. She stood up in the shallows, the cheap cotton dress I'd worn for my own funeral, clinging to a frame that suddenly seemed taller, more defined. She tilted her head back, and a low, throaty laugh escaped my lips. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated pleasure. I floated beside her, a disoriented phantom, as she strode out of the lake. The muddy ground didn't seem to cling to her. The chill night air didn't make her shiver. She looked down at my shivering, soaked form, and a smirk played on her lips. First lesson, Stella. The voice echoed in my head. Control isn't something you beg for. It's something you take. And then she started walking home. The house was exactly as I'd left it. The air was thick with the scent of disinfectant and simmering resentment. My father, Mark, was a ghost in his own armchair, his face illuminated by the flickering blue light of a silent television, a bottle of beer sweating in his hand. He was a good man, a gentleman, whose silence had been the soil in which my mother's poison grew. My mother, May, was in the kitchen. I could hear the rhythmic, aggressive thump, thump, thump of her knife against the cutting board. It was the soundtrack of my childhood. The creature wearing my skin, she called herself Lilith in the quiet space of my mind, walked into the dining room, leaving wet footprints on the polished hardwood floor. May looked up, her face a mask of irritation. "Where have you been? And look at you! You're dripping all over my clean floors. Go change. Dinner is almost ready. I made your favorite. Pan-seared steak." It was never my favorite. It was what she made when she felt I needed strengthening, when my latest failure had disappointed her. It was a command, not a meal. I, the ghost Stella, braced for the usual routine, the meek apology, the scuttling retreat upstairs, the forced meal eaten under a barrage of criticism. But Lilith just smiled, a slow, dangerous curve of the lips. "I'm not hungry," she said, her voice, my voice, a low, even purr that I had never heard before. May's knife stopped. The silence was deafening. She put the knife down with a sharp clack. "What did you just say?" "I am not hungry," Lilith repeated, enunciating each word. She pulled out a chair and sat down, soaking the velvet cushion. "And even if I were, I wouldn't eat that overcooked piece of leather you call steak." My father flinched in his chair. My mother's face went from pale to a blotchy, furious red. I'd seen that face 1,000 times. It was the prelude to a storm. "You ungrateful little—" Lilith tutted, holding up a finger. "Let's not start with the name-calling. It's so common." "I am your mother!" May shrieked, her voice cracking. "You will eat what I put in front of you. You will show me respect." She grabbed the plate of steak and slammed it onto the table in front of Lilith. "Eat it now." I felt a phantom wave of fear, the ingrained instinct to obey, to placate, to make myself small. Lilith looked down at the plate. Then she looked up at my mother, her eyes glittering with something wild and ancient. She picked up the plate. For a second, I thought she was going to comply. Instead, with a movement as swift and clean as a guillotine's fall, she flipped the entire dining table. The crash was apocalyptic. Porcelain shattered, sending steak and asparagus flying. Silverware clattered across the floor. The heavy oak table landed on its side with a deafening boom that shook the entire house. My father leaped to his feet, his beer bottle crashing to the floor. "Stella, what in God's name?" But my mother wasn't looking at him. She was staring at Lilith, her mouth agape, her carefully constructed world lying in ruins at her feet. Lilith rose from her chair, a serene smile on her face as she surveyed the chaos. She took a step towards my mother, wading through the debris of their Last Supper. "See, Stella," she murmured in my head, her thoughts a triumphant symphony. This is ecstasy." And I, the ghost of the girl who had tried to drown herself, felt a hot, unfamiliar thrill surge through my non-existent veins. It was horror. It was terror. It was glorious. To be continued. The foundation of my mother's madness was her sister, my Aunt Lily. Floating in the corner of the ruined dining room, I watched my mother's face contort with a rage that had been brewing for 30 years. And I understood it all with a clarity only the dead could possess. My mother didn't just dislike her sister. She hated her with a pathological fervor that had become the central organizing principle of her life. She envied Lily's effortless beauty, a delicate, fine-boned grace that my mother, born with a slight, almost unnoticeable limp she saw as a grotesque deformity, could never replicate. She envied Lily for acing her college entrance exams and earning a degree, while she herself had dropped out of high school to work on a factory assembly line, only to be one of the first laid off when the company downsized. Marriage was supposed to be her great equalizer. She chose my father, Mark Chu, a quiet, kind fisherman who was rarely home but came from a family whose land had been bought by developers for a small fortune. It was a practical choice, a bid for security and status. But then Lily married her college sweetheart, a handsome architect from a family with old money and good taste. Once again, my mother had lost in a competition only she was competing in. The rivalry reached a fever pitch when they became pregnant at almost the same time. My mother became obsessed. She devoured sour plums by the jarful, clinging to the old wives' tale that it would guarantee a son. A boy would be her ultimate victory, a way to prove her worth, her superiority. Then I was born, a daughter. The postpartum depression that followed was a dark, suffocating fog, lifting only when the good news arrived. Lily had also given birth to a daughter. Her name was Chloe. My mother's one-sided war, constantly lost, simply changed battlefields. Her ambition, her envy, her relentless, desperate need to win was transferred in its entirety to me. I was not her child. I was her soldier. And my lifelong enemy, designated from the moment we both drew breath, was my cousin, Chloe Zhu. My entire existence was a benchmark against hers. I remember in 5th grade, I came home with a 98 on a math test, bursting with pride. Her first question wasn't "great job." It was, "What did Chloe get?" My aunt had already posted a picture of Chloe's test on social media. A perfect 100. The light in my mother's eyes died. That night, she took a wooden ruler and struck my open palm for every point I had lost to Chloe. 2 sharp, stinging blows. As my hands swelled, she made me kneel in the living room and copy the entire test. Questions and answers, 10 times over. Tears streamed down my face. A sob escaped my throat. The sound was like a trigger. The broom she'd been using to sweep came whipping down across my back. The blow sent me sprawling onto the cold tile. She stood over me, her face wet with her own tears, her voice a raw, ragged cry of betrayal. "What right do you have to feel sorry for yourself? I wake up before dawn and stay up past midnight for you. All I ask is for you to win, just once. Is that too much to ask? Why are you so useless? If you don't want to be beaten, then you work harder. You become better than Chloe Xu so I can finally hold my head up high." After her rage was spent, a chilling calm would descend. She would wordlessly go to the kitchen and cook an elaborate meal, her version of a Chinese parent's apology, an act of service that never came with the words, "I'm sorry." She'd sit across from me, her eyes hollow, and push a bowl of rice towards me with a cold, clipped, "Eat." I wasn't a genius, so in her mind, hard work was the only solution. My life became a frantic, exhausting marathon of tutoring sessions. From the 3rd grade on, my afternoons and weekends vanished. Math, English, literature, they weren't enough. Because Chloe was taking singing and painting lessons, I had to as well. I had no artistic talent. My singing was hopelessly off-key. My drawings were clumsy and childish. But my mother didn't care about my abilities. She only cared about the optics. I'll never forget the day she stormed into my art class. I was 13. She didn't say a word. She just walked up to my easel, kicked the stool out from under me, and I tumbled to the floor. In front of 20 other kids, she shoved her phone in my face. On the screen was my Aunt Lily's latest post. A picture of Chloe beaming, holding a first-place ribbon from a youth art competition. "Look at her," my mother hissed, her voice trembling with a mixture of shame and fury. "Look how talented she is. Aren't you embarrassed? Can't you learn anything from her?" Her voice rose, drawing the attention of the teacher and the entire class. "Do you have any idea what I sacrificed for you to be in these classes? I wear old clothes. I don't buy anything for myself. Your father risks his life on the ocean to make money for your future. If you can't be grateful, the least you can do is show some results." It was a lie, of course. We were comfortable. The settlement money was mostly in her bank account, and my father sent home the majority of his earnings. But she cultivated an image of martyrdom, wearing faded shirts and using a phone case yellowed with age and sweat as proof of her sacrifice. I could only scramble back to my seat, my face burning with a humiliation so profound it felt like a physical wound. I picked up my charcoal pencil, my hand shaking, under the curious and pitiful stares of my classmates. My childhood sense of self, my personality, my pride, it was all ground into a fine dust beneath the heel of my mother's obsession. To be continued, the only time I ever truly fought back was the summer I turned 14. It was at my grandfather's birthday party. The whole family was there, a rare gathering that was always a minefield for me. My grandfather, a simple man with no sense of the undercurrents of my mother's war, made an offhand comment as Chloe, my cousin, handed him a slice of cake. "Chloe, your hair is so long, almost to your waist," he said with a warm smile. "You look like a real lady in that princess dress. Just like your mother, so graceful." I watched my mother's face freeze. Her smile tightened into a brittle line. Her eyes, dark and hard as river stones, flicked over to me. I was helping clear some plates, dressed in my usual uniform, comfortable athletic shorts and a plain t-shirt, my hair cut in a practical short bob. I was already tall for my age, nearly 5'9", with the broad shoulders of a swimmer. Next to Chloe's petite, delicate frame, I felt like a clumsy giant. People had often said I looked like a boy. The car ride home was a silent, suffocating ordeal. The next day, she came home with a shopping bag. Inside was the most garish princess dress I had ever seen, a monstrosity of cheap, scratchy lace, gaudy ribbons, and a violent shade of pink that hurt the eyes. "Try it on," she commanded. "No," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I don't like it." That was all it took. She flew into a rage. She stormed into my room and ripped open my closet doors. With a pair of scissors she'd grabbed from the kitchen, she began to destroy my clothes. The cheap sportswear she'd bought to prove she was sacrificing for my education was sliced to ribbons. She even tore the white t-shirt I was wearing, her nails digging into my shoulders, leaving angry red welts. Her voice was distorted with fury, a venomous hiss. "Who are you trying to disgust, dressing like this every day? You're a girl. You're supposed to look like a girl. Lily's daughter gets praise for being a lady, and my daughter has to be one too." She forced the scratchy dress over my head, the rough fabric scraping against my skin. "You're fat as a pig. Do you know Chloe only weighs 105 pounds? It's shameful for a girl to be fat." The injustice of it all, the dress, the insults, the years of repressed anger, finally boiled over. 14 years of being a silent sponge for her poison, and I finally erupted. I shoved her away, hard. "I can't be Chloe!" I screamed, my voice raw and unfamiliar. I clawed at the hideous dress, trying to rip it off my body. But in my rage, my fingers were clumsy. The cheap fabric felt like a straitjacket. "I will never be her. She's smart because both her parents have degrees. She can draw because her grandmother is an artist, and she weighs 105 pounds because she's 5'3". I'm almost 5'9". The slap was so hard my head snapped to the side. A universe of stars exploded behind my eyes. I felt a warm, wet trickle from my nose. A drop of blood landed on the pristine white bow of the cursed dress, staining it a brilliant, shocking crimson. My ears were ringing. My mother grabbed me by the arm, her grip like iron, and dragged me out of the apartment, down the stairs, and into the middle of the community courtyard. She threw me onto the concrete like a bag of trash. Neighbors started to gather, drawn by the commotion. They saw a teenage girl in a torn, ridiculous dress, her face streaked with tears and blood, and her mother standing over her, heaving with sobs. A kind woman from the next building over stepped forward. "May, calm down. You shouldn't hit your daughter like this. Let's get her cleaned up." Another man added, "She's a teenager. They're rebellious at this age. They have their pride. Why not talk about this at home?" I was crying so hard I could barely breathe, my body convulsing with hiccuping sobs. I couldn't form a single word of defense. I didn't understand. How could these strangers see that I needed my dignity protected? But my own mother couldn't. She was like a machine on the verge of breakdown, her wails rising above the murmurs of the crowd. She pointed a trembling finger at me. "She's an ungrateful monster," she cried out to the audience she had assembled. "I work my fingers to the bone for her, and she despises me. She says I'm uneducated, that I'm not good enough for her, that I'm a burden." I stared at her, dumbfounded, as she wove a tapestry of lies. She told them I had screamed at her, insulted her, called her poor. She said I hated the dress because it was cheap, that I tore it myself, and told her to drop dead. She was so convincing, her performance so Oscar-worthy, that even I, for a fleeting, dizzying moment, wondered if I had actually said those things. The tide of public opinion turned in an instant. The sympathetic neighbors now looked at me with disapproval. "That's no way to talk to your mother," one of them clucked. "I didn't. That's not what I said," I finally managed to gasp out, but my voice was choked and broken, lost between sobs. My defense was meaningless. I had already been tried and convicted. I was the ungrateful daughter. And in that crowd, I saw a classmate from my school, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and morbid curiosity. I felt like a chicken, plucked bare and put on display for everyone to mock. When the crowd finally dispersed, leaving just the two of us in the twilight, she hauled me to my feet. She grabbed my face, her fingers digging into my cheeks. "Stella Chu," she whispered, her voice a cold, terrifying promise. "Don't you ever think you can rebel against me? I have ways to teach you a lesson." Her eyes were devoid of any warmth. "I want you to beat Chloe for your own good. In this world, people only respect the best. If you're not the best, you'll spend your whole life being looked down on. If you ever defy me again, she snarled, her face inches from mine, I will drag you right back out here. We'll see how you feel when the whole world knows what a shameful creature you are. And that was it. That was the day I understood there was no escape. Not in this house, not in this life. Her control was absolute, and her greatest weapon was my own shame. To be continued. Now, back in the wreckage of the dining room, Lilith took another step toward my mother. The serene, almost playful smile never left her face. My mother, May, stumbled backward, her hand flying to her chest, her face a mask of disbelief and dawning terror. This wasn't her daughter. The cowering, tearful girl she had so expertly manipulated for 14 years was gone. In her place stood this creature, wearing Stella's face but looking at her with eyes that held no fear, only contempt. What are you doing? May stammered, her voice a thin, reedy thing. Redecorating, Lilith said smoothly. She picked up a shard of a broken plate, turning it over in her fingers, admiring the way the light caught its jagged edge. I felt the room lacked a certain honesty. It was all so clean, so fake, much like you. My father finally found his voice. Stella, that's enough. Apologize to your mother right now. Lilith didn't even turn to look at him. Stay out of this, Mark, she said. And the casual use of his first name was more shocking than any shout. You lost the right to have an opinion the first time you sat in that chair and watched her hit me and did nothing. You are not a husband or a father. You are furniture. The words hit him like a physical blow. He sagged, his face ashen. He had no response, because it was true. His passivity had been her greatest enabler. Lilith dropped the shard, the sound a tiny tink in the heavy silence. She advanced on my mother, who was now backed against the wall, trapped between the sideboard and the doorway. Watch closely, little bird, Lilith's voice purred in my consciousness. This is how you dismantle a tyrant. You don't reason with them. You take away their power, piece by piece. All my life, Lilith began, her voice now resonating with my own suppressed pain. You have used Chloe as a whip to flay my skin. Every test score, every pound on the scale, every compliment she received was another lash on my back. You never saw me. You only saw a broken reflection of your own pathetic jealousy. That's not true, my mother cried, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. I did it for you. I wanted you to have the best. You wanted to win, Lilith corrected, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper. You wanted to beat Lily? I was just the pawn in your sad little game. You talk about sacrifice? Your sacrifice was a performance. You wore old clothes while thousands of dollars from Dad's settlement sat in your bank account, gathering interest. You complained about the cost of my tutoring, but you never missed a chance to buy some new piece of jewelry when you thought no one was looking. I, the ghost, felt a jolt. I never knew that. She had always made me feel like every penny spent on me was a drop of her own blood. My mother's eyes widened. How did you know about that? I know everything, Lilith said with a chilling finality. She was closer now, close enough for my mother to feel the cold aura radiating from her. I know you resent Dad for being at sea, not because you miss him, but because it means you have to do all the work of tormenting me yourself. I know you tell your friends that I'm difficult and rebellious to garner their sympathy, twisting every story until I'm the villain and you're the long-suffering saint. She leaned in, her voice a venomous caress. And I know that day you dragged me into the courtyard. You enjoyed it. You loved the feeling of everyone looking at you, pitying you. You got high on their sympathy. My humiliation was your drug. Each word was a scalpel, precisely dissecting the rotten truth of my mother's soul. She began to hyperventilate, her carefully constructed facade of martyrdom crumbling into dust. No, you're a monster. You're not my daughter, she gasped, sliding down the wall until she was a heap on the floor, amidst the shattered remains of her dinner. You're right, Lilith said, looking down at her with an expression of profound boredom. Your daughter is dead. She jumped into a lake tonight because you convinced her that her life was worthless. You killed her. She let that statement hang in the air, a final, devastating blow. Then she turned her back on the sobbing woman and walked calmly towards the hallway. My father, who had been frozen this whole time, finally moved. Stella, where are you going? Lilith paused at the doorway, looking back over her shoulder. The smirk was back. To my room, she said, to get a good night's sleep. Tomorrow, I'm going to pay a visit to my dear Aunt Lily and my darling cousin Chloe. I feel like we have a lot to catch up on. My incorporeal heart hammered against my ribs. It wasn't over. It was just beginning. She wasn't just here to destroy my mother. She was here to burn down the entire rotten system that had created her. And I was going to have a front row seat for the inferno.